are listening to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. In this episode, we're featuring Budgeting for Bookstores, a session that was presented at Children's Institute 2024 in New Orleans.
Okay, so introductions. We're going to tell you who we are and why you should listen to us if you choose to. And I think one of the things we were all talking about is like, if you came here because you think that we are the people who have all of this figured out and have always had it figured out, that is not the case. We are people who have had enough time by trial and error to get a little bit better at this stuff and give you a little bit of insight, especially conceptually, about what budgeting is for and what we can do with it. So we're going to do introductions. I'm Jessica Stockton-Bagnulo. I'm the owner of Greenlight Bookstore in Brooklyn, New York. We have been around for about 15 years. And here's my true budgeting confession. We were not really forecasting our expenses until this year. So we're still learning. We're still learning stuff. So everyone else, you don't have to do a true confession, but do introduce yourself.
My name is Gabriel Moushabeck, and I run Booklink Booksellers in Northampton, Massachusetts. I've been in this location for 28 and a half years, and before that, I had 3 bookstores in New York for about 20 plus years.
And he's still smiling. I love that.
Do you have a confession?
Any true confessions?
I basically love what I do, and it hasn't made me rich.
Hi, I'm Tina Ferguson. I own Face in a Book, Bookstore and Gifts out in El Dorado Hills, California, which is about 25 minutes outside of Sacramento. My true confession is that I did a budget when I did my business plan, and I haven't looked at it much since.
My name is Sarah Hutton. I'm with Village Books and Paper Dreams in Bellingham and Linden, Washington. We're about an hour and a half north of Seattle. Our store's been open. It'll be 44 years in July, and we have been co-owners for 7 years. And my true confession is that the reason I know even an ounce of this is because we had massive bookkeeper turnover, and I was doing the books very, very late into the night.
It happens. Okay. So our agenda today, we did our introductions. We're going to talk, this is really more of a conceptual session. This is not an accounting class. We're not going to talk that much about math. This is a sort of like what and why of budgeting, and then we're going to point you in the direction of more resources to get into the nitty-gritty stuff. So we're going to talk about the purpose of budgeting, the considerations of budgeting, how all of the sort of like incomes and outflows work, some best practices, and then we're going to have some interactive activities, which you guys actually get to. We're going to have class participation, and then we're going to leave a chunk of the session time at the end for questions. So let's jump right into it. I love this thought. You need to do well before you do good. So I know a lot of us are mission-driven stores, and even if we are general bookstores, we're doing this because we're passionate about it, because we care about our communities, but you can't do good if your store isn't sustainable. So that's why we're here, is to get to that point of we can pay the bills and keep our mission going. So first we're going to talk about some key concepts. Gabriel, do you want to take this one and walk us through this?
Sure. So I'd like to provide an overview of the finances of the bookstore, because understanding the financial structure of the bookstore will help everyone put together a budget. So the finances of a bookstore are like a good many systems. They're complex, but they're very interconnected. So it's important for new booksellers to have some understanding of the financial structure of the bookstore. First of all, I'd like to talk about terms. Now, every bookstore should have open account terms with publishers and distributors, because open account terms set up an ongoing account with publishers, so you can buy books without having to pay for them right away. You can have terms. Some publishers offer you 30, 60, 90, or 120-day terms. Also, the terms say whether you have free freight or you have to pay for freight yourself. And then, of course, it talks about discounts, which you could have. We're going to skip that. We're not going to talk about discounts. But next, inventory terms. So in my store, every section has to justify its existence. And this is what I tell all my staff. We basically walk around the store and make sure that books are turning at the rate that we would like them to turn at. Same thing with other items in the store, such as sidelines, whether they are cards or gifts, bags, candles, candy, whatever it is. So if books are slow movers, they should be returned. If sidelines are slow movers or not moving, they should also be discontinued because sidelines are bought on non-returnable basis. Returns are crucial for every bookstore in my book because although it's not cash, they should be done on a regular basis. And we do it in our store on a monthly basis. They can be done by publisher, they can be done by distributor. And I like to get all my staff involved in the actual returns process. So we call it management by walking around, as MBWA. In business school, they call it management by objectives. I call it management by walking around. So we're lucky in this business that we are able to return books. In many businesses, when you buy something, you pretty much own it. But in this business, although it involves you lose certain discounts when you return them, as well as shipping, it's really crucial to keep your merchandise fresh so that people can come in and browse. But there are certain things, like I can only tell you what I do in my store. There are certain books that we never return. For instance, we're in an academic community, so I never return classics. I never return backlist titles. Or if I have local authors that live in my community, I never return my books. For instance, Eric Carle used to have a studio in Northampton, and he was a regular. So I never return Eric Carle books, whether they move or they're slow movers or they don't move at all. We always have them. Same thing with Mo Willems books. He lives in Northampton, so I have a section that say Mo Willems books. Same thing with Jane Yolen. We never return her books. So, as well as local history books, we never return these. However, we made the commitment when we opened the store, because we are in an academic community, that classics and backlists are the backbone of our business. So we never, ever return them, regardless of how fast they move. When it comes to sidelines, carrying good sidelines that lend themselves to bookstores are very important. Like greeting cards, magnets, puzzles, book boxes, candles, it's very important for the financial health of the store. Every extra sale that a frontline bookseller hand sells adds to the bottom line. And some bookstores may approach 50% of their inventory and sales invested in sidelines. You have to be very careful when it comes to sidelines because they are all purchased on non-returnable basis. However, sidelines have a much better discount than books do because you buy them and then you can price them at double plus freight. They're not priced like publishers price the books. Some have advised that bookstores to carry as much as 25 to 30% of their stock as sidelines. Perhaps this is the only business that encourages its stores to carry less of what they primarily sell so that to make a go of it. But it's true. As long as they complement your mission or your mission statement. Same thing as sidelines. I don't want to get too involved in remainders, hurts, or used books, but they're basically bought on non-returnable basis. Again, you can price these as what you think you can price them at, but I strongly recommend that you know what you're buying because once you buy these remainders, you are stuck with them. They are yours. The last thing that I want to touch up on are promotions and backlist specials. When it comes to backlist books, in our store, we basically buy them on delayed billing basis. So some publishers offer you as much as 120 days delayed billing. Now, when you buy something, you're not going to sell it in 30 days. So chances are you're better off buying them on delayed billing and hanging on to them for 120 days, because that gives you an opportunity to sell them during these 120 days. So for instance, after December 31st, I get emails from some publishers that telling me, okay, we have a promos for a backlist special for 120 days. I go for it. I generate reports based on what we've sold in the last 3 to 4 months, and I go ahead and place my orders because payment will not be due until May. So chances are we have 4 months to sell them. And by the time May comes, they will have another delayed billing offer, or some other publisher will have it. So I go ahead and do that. And one thing that I've found helpful in my business is when it comes to backlist books or classics, it's great to buy them from local publishers. However, I found that there are some remainder houses buy classics and backlist titles from the London Book Fair, which happens every March. And these are published by British publishers, beautiful editions. You can buy them at a fraction of the cost of backlist books that are sold by by the big 5 publishers here. For instance, Arcturus Books in England, they sell these beautiful editions for under $3, like for $2.20. And if you go to some remainder houses that go to the London Book Fair, they have them on their websites, they're unmarked, and they're gorgeous. So I basically love to buy these because I end up selling them and they don't have an American price on them. So you can price them, you could put a price that you feel you can get. And the last thing I want to mention is co-ops. Most publishers have done away with offering you co-ops these days, but they do offer you a certain percentage based on your sales, and it will be added automatically as a credit to your statements. One thing I want to add about co-ops is there are still some publishers out there that offer you newsletter co-ops. In other words, if your store makes a newsletter, say every quarter or just before the holidays, and you show their books in your newsletter. Basically, you write 50 words and you describe the book and put it in that newsletter. It can be online, it can be printed. You send it to the publisher, and some of them offer you as much as $50 to $80 per title as a co-op. And the reason I mention that is because every little thing helps when it comes to running a bookstore, whether it's returns, co-op, buying smart. So we do a lot of that at our bookstore, and we find it extremely helpful. And I think I will pass this on back to you, Jessica.
Thanks. Okay, so we've covered some key concepts. We're going to talk about what are the big considerations for budgeting. So we're going to talk about revenue. That's all of the incoming stuff. We're going to talk about the cost of goods sold. That's the product itself. Then other fixed costs and variable costs. So I think if we start with revenue, Sarah, do you want to pick that one up?
Yep, absolutely. So you'll probably hear us talk about ABACUS a lot. So if this is kind of your first go around, ABACUS is the annual financial study of bookstore health. So every summer, and I think the call just went out not horribly long ago, that ABACUS is open for reporting. So you are able to put in your store's data, and when they crunch all the numbers from across the hundreds and hopefully thousands of stores that participate, you then get a report back that talks about the financial health of the industry and also the financial health of your store specifically. And a lot of these numbers are broken out into not as profitable, mildly profitable, and more profitable. So you're able to sort of pin your income or your revenue or your cost of goods or your personnel cost, and then sort of compare where you are for the rest of your categories. So when we are talking about ABACUS, this is the type of study that we're referring to. So we pulled out one number just to kind of give a mental exercise here. So in ABACUS 22, theoretically, for a bookstore to be profitable, it should be making $336 per square foot of selling space
That's annually, right?
annually, or $253 for total space. So for this, you don't usually count like your back room and your restrooms or things like that. Receiving area. So if you think about this in terms of your personal sales, if your store has been open more than a year, you should be making $336,000 if you have a 1,000 square foot store. Right? So
Gross.
gross, yeah.
Sorry, it says net, but I think we mean gross.
Yes. Gross sales.
Good question.
So if that number seems either high or low or whoa, right, that might be a point to look at.
Yes. Sorry about that. That's a typo. But we're talking about like total dollars coming in divided by your square footage. Like that's what this number is about. So it's not like there is a standard sales number. It's more about like how much for your size of store is going to put you in a good place.
Yes, so this is definitely that sort of right-sized approach.
Right. Okay. So sorry. Net in the sense of after you've pulled out returns, this is your sales number. The person who spoke in the back is PK Sinwani with the ABA. If you have questions about ABACUS or honestly like any other financial questions whatsoever, like he is an excellent resource and he would love to talk to you. So we'll probably call out PK a couple of times. Okay. Oh, so sorry. Do you want to repeat that?
I'm just going to give it.
You're just going to give him the mic. Okay. PK is just going to have a mic, and that's okay. He's not officially on the panel, but
He'll be at karaoke later.
Okay, so that's our revenue side. Anything else you want to add on that?
Yes, just real quickly. So this is also when you do ABACUS. I was looking at my notes from when we had our initial call, and one of the things I had written down like 3 things, and one of them was radical acceptance. So there's just a point where looking at these numbers, you're verifying what you probably already know in your heart and in your gut. Like we were talking, about management by walking around, and you look at a section and you're like, right? That's not data driven, but you're looking at it and you're like, that's not correct. This is an exercise in letting you know that your gut feeling is probably on the right track, but you're just backing it up with the data. So accepting where you're at and then making changes. So if you're a smaller store, maybe you put in a spinner of something that's a higher priced item or something where you have the power over the pricing to maximize those dollars in a literally like 12-inch by 12-inch spinner. It's a square foot, and you could make, a few thousand extra dollars if you put in whatever item there. So thinking critically about your space might be reflected by something that you see on the ABACUS. And you can take any of the ABACUS numbers. You can take your payroll dollars, which is something you should be able to get from whatever HR, payroll, service, or QuickBooks, or whatever you use, and then compare that to sales, right? Personnel should be about 24.6, 25% of your sales. And if it's far afield from that number, maybe that's the one that you focus on to see if you can move that needle a little bit.
I think you've given us like a really good definition of what budgeting is. It's like looking at the financial data to prove what you already know and then make changes.
Yeah.
Like that's what budgeting is. Okay, so well, let's talk a little bit more about our biggest expense in our field, cost of goods sold. And you talked about this a little bit already, but Gabriel, do you want to circle back?
So basically, the formula for cost of goods sold is beginning inventory plus purchases less ending inventory gives you cost of goods sold. You can do this on a monthly basis. If you have a POS system, it's very easy to do, and it gives you a pretty good idea of where you stand financially.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
What should that number look like for you to think that you're doing well financially?
What I can tell you is the lower the number, the better.
Okay, good to know.
Okay. So inventory returns should be made regularly, and that's what, cash will not be returned basically to you, but as we pay our invoices, for instance, every end of every month, we do our returns, and we use that figure to deduct them from payment. So it's just like having cash on hand, basically.
And we will talk a little bit more about like the ABACUS averages for stuff like cost of goods a little bit further on in our talking. Okay, so then we're going to talk about once you've paid for the books and the sidelines and the everything else, what are the other expenses that are coming out of that revenue? So Tina, do you want to talk us through some costs?
Sure. I do like to spend money, but sometimes it's like I don't want to spend it on these things. But these are the things that make everything work. And I do believe that you have a lot of control over your expenses, whether you think you do or not. So obviously, you've got your occupancy costs, your rent, and unfortunately, depending on where you live and depending on your landlord, you can negotiate well, or they might not work with you. It's really difficult. So that is a fixed cost for the most part, but fight for yourself. Find someone that will fight with you to get yourself the best deal. Insurance, you can always go and look at those kinds of costs annually, get quotes, but I love that the ABA gives us so many opportunities to use the people that they have recommended and provided. So use those vendors because they're really great to work with and they really take such good care of you. Payroll, I know that some people might think that's a fixed cost. I personally think that it's a variable cost because you need to look at your payroll and I think you need to justify what you're spending on your staff each and every day. Like take a look at your daily sales, and if your daily sales don't justify the amount of staff that you have in the store, you have to make a tough decision. I personally have an 1,800 square foot store, and from day one that we opened, we have only one person in the store at all times.
Wow.
That's it. And we have very little theft, and we have 2 doors, front and back. And we are able to really do a really good job of managing the store just by one person. So think about, can you do that? Also, in terms of payroll, look at, our employees maybe wanting a little bit of extra money. Maybe they're willing to clean your floors at night. Maybe they're willing to do some janitorial to make that extra money, and so you're paying them instead of having to go outside to a janitorial service that might be much more expensive. So that's why I think payroll is a variable expense. Wi-Fi phone service, you really can't get by without it. So again, look and again, what I have found is that I kind of like, if it's not broke, don't fix it. I mean, don't, like, if it's working, just leave it alone. But you're going to need to, like, look at things and find, is there a better deal? Is there a better provider? Is there a faster service? Is there someone with better customer service that can work with me? Look at those things as at least once a year. And subscriptions, really, you could spend a lot of money on subscriptions to all these different organizations, different computer kind of internet things. Decide what's really going to be best for you and what will save you time and staff hours. So Edelweiss, paying for that service and analytics for me is worth its value in gold because it makes me make much better decisions on my buying and on my choices. And so take a look at those as well. So, oopsie. I'm no longer here. But take a look at those often. Once you set something in motion, keep reevaluating it to make sure that it's working for you.
Right. So these are the fixed costs in terms of they tend to be the same month by month, although I agree that payroll can be more variable. I mean, some months we have more events happening than others, and so
yes.
our payroll is going to change in that way. Or we may make different decisions about what is priority. So then the other category of cost is variable cost. So do you want to talk about that as well?
Oh, sure. So publisher bills, I am one of those weirdos that I really love looking at my publisher bills. I love looking at what I'm spending, and I love looking at how, especially with some of the publishers that offer really good terms, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm only paying $1,000 right now, but I'm going to owe $12,000 in the future. And it's just so nice to know that that's in the future. So it just really helps you to keep going. Shipping costs, okay, this is huge for me. This was the hidden secret cost that blew my budget was shipping costs. I learned right away, very quickly, that you always want to order the minimums from your publishers to get free freight. But what I did not realize is the huge amount of freight that you pay on sidelines.
Yes.
So when I started purchasing sidelines for my store, I just didn't really think about it. I didn't really pay attention. So I bought these really cool bookends and bookmarks, and they were so awesome, and people were going to love them. And they got to the store. I spent $270 to try it out. They charged me almost $100 in freight, and they were plastic. And so you really want to take advantage of when you're going to buy sidelines, look and ask, are there minimums? Is there a free freight special? Is there a certain place, like $1,000 will get me free freight? It's worth it because the freight is so expensive for sidelines. So that's definitely something I learned.
Yeah, same thing with the remainders. The books are so heavy, and freight can be really, really expensive. So you always want to think about building up the price into the selling price when you're selling remainders. Otherwise, you'll end up losing.
And there's probably other things we could talk about in this category. I mean, you may have advertising or marketing expenses that vary from month to month, depending on what you have going on. I think credit card commissions are a huge thing that can sort of like knock you out and surprise you in terms of expenses. So it's worth like looking at who your credit card processor is and seeing if you can get a better deal, either from that same processor or from somebody else. So that's what we're looking at. We sort of like we have our revenue, we have our costs. So let's talk a little bit more about what are some best practices in terms of like keeping your financials where you want them to be and making a plan. So you want to start with Sarah and move this way?
Sure. So the line at the bottom is one that was sort of in my family. So we did not grow up with tons, right? And so there's a point at you don't want to run out of money before you run out of month. And so really understanding when your income comes in and when your outgo goes is really critical. And that might be on a monthly basis, or it might be on a quarterly basis or an annual basis, but knowing when you're going to owe something. So yeah, you buy $1,000 now, but you owe $12,000 3 months from now. That is a critical piece of information for you to know, because then if there are some of those variable costs that you might be able to back off of, or wow, you really need, new blinds because they broke, like maybe you stretch it another month because this other bill is coming, right? So just being conscientious of that literal cash flow and your liquidity will serve you well long term.
Oh, me? Okay. I think that one of the things is one thing about staff. So if you are a small store like I am and you really can't afford to pay another staff person to be at an event, we ask our friends and our family, and we say, we will give you a signed copy of this author's book if you will just come and do traffic control, or if you will just come and help set up. And that has proven to be a really great partnership with our friends and bookstore customers, and it has built really goodwill, and it has an added staff cost. And then the other one that I want to just do best practices on is like discounts, maybe for schools or maybe for organizations, or maybe it's your loyalty program to your customers. Be really careful about those. Don't offer them willy-nilly because it will cut into your bottom line. I would say maybe offer quarterly promotions and discounts on a quarterly basis.
I want to share like a short anecdote with you. I once got to know a bank credit manager really well, and he comes up to me one day and he says, hey, Gabriel, why don't I offer you a line of credit? And I said, I don't need it. I think I'm good. He said, let me tell you something. If you don't need it, let me give it to you now, because when you need it, I won't be able to give it to you. So if you have access to a line of credit, $50,000, $100,000, it's good to get it if you can, because when you need it, it's going to be very difficult to get it. The other thing is when you're buying sidelines, like I can tell you I have roughly about 30 different card lines in my store. And I never buy them all at the same time because the bill is going to come due in 30 days. So I have to pay for all of them in 30 days. So I always space things out, like every other month or every third month or because you want to be careful. Cash flow has to always be coming in as it's going out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I would add to all of this, like, I think a lot of times it can take a year of seeing what the patterns of your store are before you can start to effectively kind of forecast or guess about these things. You're like, which are our busy months where we make a profit? Which are the months where we don't make a profit? And how can we sort of plan our cash flow accordingly? Like, we have a line of credit that kicks in July when a lot of our customers are out of town, and then, gets paid off in September when big books come out and our sales are different. So having a little bit of a sense of like what those ups and downs are for your store, that's really what budgeting is all about, is sort of like making that plan based on what you know. Mm-hmm. And I think it's okay if it takes a little while. I know we have lots of new stores here this time, so you might not know yet what your flow over the course of the year is. You probably made a guess if you made a business plan or something like that, but the longer you're in business, the better you get to know your store and your community's patterns, and the better you can sort of plan ahead for like, all right, when am I going to pay this bill? When am I going to pay off this line of credit? When am I going to need a little bit more? When am I going to be a little more flush? And but that just comes with a little bit of time.
Jessica, can I add on to that for a second?
Please.
So I think having that expansive time is also helpful so that you don't overcorrect. So I know when I was initially a kids buyer, I would look at my turns monthly, and I would start to panic if something got too low. Like, oh no, this section has to go. And then the next month it would be like wildly high, and I was like, oh no, I need more stuff, right? And so you're over responding because you're looking at too small of a time frame. So, give yourself a little bit of grace to know those patterns of now is a little quieter, but this is going to bump up so I can ride out this mellow point here. And then that way you're not going all the way down the road. Don't drive behind me.
Okay. Okay, so we're going to try kind of an activity, like based on what we're talking about in terms of like what are the factors that you need to consider in trying to get to a sustainable, profitable place for your store. And this is sort of a thought exercise. If folks feel like sharing their answers or opinion, that's awesome. And we'll also hear from the panelists on it. So here's the first one. Activity time. What are the top 3 things that could be done to improve the following P&L? P&L is a profit and loss statement. So this is a really abbreviated profit and loss statement. Oops, sorry. Wait, why did it go too fast? Okay, so the numbers in the column FY22, these are the ABACUS averages for reporting stores in 2022. So these are some sort of like average bookstore numbers, and then your store is like some imaginary numbers from like a pretend store. So as we're looking at this, we have our net profit margin, total cost of goods sold, gross margin, food and beverage and cafe sales, personnel expenses, occupancy expenses, and other expenses, and telecommunications gets its own little line. So as you're looking at this, is there anything that sort of stands out as something that could be room for improvement or something that could be changed to make the store a little bit better? I'm actually like, this store's not doing too bad. But there's always room for improvement, so we're thinking about like maybe take a minute and think about it. Or if you have a thought right now, feel free to raise your hand. Lisa. Yes, I have to talk. You have to talk in the mic. I'm sorry.
What stands out is personnel. This looks like my store where the personnel expenses are very high. On the other hand, I pay a living wage, and that's something that I think would be a goal for most of us. So personnel's tricky in that way.
Absolutely. I mean, you got to keep your store open, but sometimes your priorities are not getting like something down to like the lowest possible number. They're getting it to the place where it needs to be. So yeah, personnel is higher than average here, but maybe that's okay for this store. This store still is at a 2.1% profit rate, so maybe that's not actually a change. But it's something to look at and consider thoughtfully, for sure.
Makes sense.
Any other thoughts? Yeah, if you want to step over to the microphone in the back. Wait, do we have a microphone in the back? One moment.
Thanks. Do you want me to put it here? Okay. So So, looking at the cost of goods sold, if the store is coming in at 55.4, that's above what you would be paying if you were getting everything directly from the publishers. So maybe buy a little bit less from Ingram or a wholesaler and try to do more of your purchasing directly from the publisher.
Awesome. That's a great thought. Thank you. Yeah. Want to step up to the mic? Thanks.
I would probably start by looking at the food and beverage cafe sales and why they are decreasing, seeing if there's opportunities to bundle, run promotions, if the cost of those materials are also what's impacting my cost of goods, and it could also have an impact on my personnel expenses. Look at the overall profitability of that as a separate business to determine, is it really the right thing for the mix in my store?
I love that. Thank you.
This is very good. I also, speaking of food and beverage, we have a small cafe in our store, and a few months ago, there's many cafes in the building that I'm in. I'm in a building that has 35 stores. So I was walking around downstairs, and I looked at the prices that the other cafes had, and then all of a sudden I said, whoa, they're charging $4.65 for a latte. How come ours is still, $3.15? So one night I went and took a picture of the menu and then went upstairs and called one of my managers. I said, we need to revisit this. So, food prices have gone up dramatically over the last, 3 to 5 years. So if you have a cafe, I strongly recommend that you take a close look at your prices.
Anything else, panelists, you want to add to this?
I will say that one of the things that I think about is for personnel expenses is not necessarily just dollars per hour when you're thinking about living wage, but like how many hours are you open? If you're paying somebody a livable wage to stand there and there's no sales, like that's not helpful for your business. That's helpful for them and that's fantastic, but maybe you need to close an hour earlier. Or maybe you have too many people on staff and it's less effective and you can have maybe a more flexible scheduling for them, or somebody can be working on orders from a back office and somebody's in the front or something like that. If you find that your personnel cost is high, but you want to maintain that value of paying that living wage, you might need to examine it in a different manner.
Yeah, and part of the consideration of payroll is like putting the staff hours where the work is.
Yes.
Like making sure that folks aren't focused on something that's not helpful, that they're doing something that's contributing to the overall financial health of the store. Okay, thank you. That was activity number 1. Good job, you all pass. Everybody wins. Okay, so in the second activity, we're going to look at what are the top 5, or however many we can think of, practices this bookstore can take to maintain good financial health. So here's our sample little bookstore. Neighborhood Books is a bookstore that opened in early 2021. The store has 5 enthusiastic staff members on payroll. The building is around 1,200 square feet in area with a 900 square foot of selling space. Since the end of 2022, they've been experiencing increased in-store business with decreased online sales. So this is what you know. This is your little snapshot. Thoughts on what this bookstore can do or focus on to be financially sustainable. Audience thoughts or panelist thoughts? Yeah, can we run the mic? Sorry to make you run up. Absolutely. Thanks for your patience. No, that's no good for nobody. Fair. Thank you.
My first question is wondering how much of this of the space is stockroom and storage. If you are seeing decreased online sales, I'm thinking you can turn some of that stockroom space into actual inventory selling space, giving you more selling space for the increased in-store business and giving your booksellers increased opportunity to actually have things to do and not sit there waiting for an online order that might not get there. It's more productive to have that increased sell space versus something that's more of a passive stream of income, I guess.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Looking at that sort of percentage and knowing that your sales are happening in store, the more space you can get, the better. Thank you. That's great. Mm-hmm. Other thoughts? Over here. Sorry, can we run it again? Thank you.
Thank you. In line with that, 300 square feet is a lot of space. And And while inventory is nice for storing that, there's this issue of online sales that I'm wondering about marketing, and if you can turn some of that 300 square feet into an event space that you're renting out to community members for things, that brings in a lot more revenue.
I love that. I wouldn't even have thought of that. Like event space, not just for your own events, but as a potential rental income stream, which like adds to your bottom line. That's awesome. Any other ideas?
If you have 5 enthusiastic employees, maybe reevaluate what they do in the store, and maybe have one focus on the online portion of it to reinvigorate online sales, because you don't need that much. You don't need to have things on the shelf in order for them to make an online sale. You can have it delivered, either drop ship it from Ingram or something like that. So you know, reallocate where your employees make you money.
Absolutely. There's one more right behind you.
I was also thinking about the 5 enthusiastic staff members and where their focus is, because you can be enthusiastic, but your version of what you should be thinking about as your business might be different than what they are thinking. For example, with like the lemonade stand that's in the Making a Manager, you could have an employee that thinks that it's better to have like a community space rather than focusing on the selling of the lemonade. So thinking about what your staff members are focusing on, and also just getting them into the habit of offering to order, letting people know about the website. That's like, oh, you can just order number 2 in before you even come in. You know, like, you're going to want the next one. Like, if they're enthusiastic about that, then that can be passed on in those ways.
Awesome. So some staff education, some marketing, moving those numbers in the right direction. Any panelists want to add anything to these thoughts about this neighborhood books?
We have a to-do list in our store for the staff. Basically, we all know that some customers don't put books back where they're supposed to go, so my staff are always running around fixing the store, so it has to be immaculate at any point in time. But we have a to-do list, and basically when this is done, you can write shelf talkers, you can change window displays, they're always doing stuff to help the store so that they're not sitting idle, basically doing nothing and waiting for the next sale. So.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for your ideas about this. You guys are obviously already experts, and we're grateful to learn from you. Wait, sorry, Tina or Sarah, did you want to add anything on here?
I would just suggest, I don't know, it sounds like they've got, increased traffic into the store, but I think it's really important for a bookstore to be part of the community, and so join a community organization. I personally joined the Rotary Club as a brand new bookstore, and that has been wonderful to get to know not only the community leaders, but also to be part of not only giving back from my store, but giving back in the community in other areas. So whether it's an organization like that, or your local chamber, or just another organization that you can partner with, it really adds more awareness about your store, and it also just feels really good.
Yeah. And that can be an investment.
Yes, it is,
for sure. All right, Sarah, you got anything?
I think I'm good.
Okay, cool. Okay, so this is our final sort of like actionable slide. We're going to talk a little bit about next steps. So these slides are in your app, and they're on the Children's Institute website, and all of these are, clickable links. The ABA's Bookstore Resource Library has a ton of very specific, like drill down budgeting workshops and education that's there to find. The 2022 ABACUS financial benchmarking results. You can look at ABACUS 2022. You could and reporting now for 2023. I know it can feel overwhelming to look at a great big spreadsheet and be like, I have to find what all of these numbers are. But give it a couple of hours. It's an incredible investment in you understanding your business better and sort of like what you can learn from the other stores in our community. But you can look at 2022 now. You can fill out 2023. The financial budgeting and monitoring workbook is also linked there. That's an incredible resource. And then this one I would highly recommend. If any of you were at Winter Institute, there was a session called Open Book Management. And honestly, that was maybe the most incredible tool I've ever found in terms of budgeting. And the whole idea of it is that you become completely transparent with your finances with your staff, because it's empowering for staff to understand the business model, to understand what those incomes and outflows are, so that they are invested in the project of moving your numbers in the direction that you want them to go. You make a lot of choices about what you want to be tracking, but it's all there, and staff actually participate in forecasting those numbers. So we've started doing this in my store. It's taken a lot of the stress out of my brain and sort of distributed it among many brains, which makes it a little bit easier for everyone. And my management team has gotten involved in doing that forecasting, not only of sales, various revenue streams, but our cost of goods, our payroll, our other expenses, and they are have a much better understanding of what it takes for our business to be healthy and what they can do specifically in their role to make that happen. So I highly recommend that session, and to whatever degree you are comfortable in whatever your role is in your store, sharing that financial data with the remainder of your staff and your coworkers, it can be empowering, and it makes everybody it's an all boats rise kind of thing, and it actually can be really great for the health of your store.
Excellent point.
So click through these if you have time, and then our call to action is you can begin working on a financial plan to set your bookstore up for success if you don't already have one. The financial budgeting and monitoring workbook is a great place to start. It's a great template, and then participating in ABACUS will also sort of force you to do that work, to look at your numbers and see what they're telling you about what you already know. And now we have Q&A. So step up to the mic if you want to, if you have questions or thoughts that you want to share with the group, because obviously there's a lot of insights in this room. We have some time for Q&A.
Come on up.
Go for it. Yes, please, by all means.
If it's okay, I had two.
Yeah.
In the very beginning, you talked about delayed billing.
Yes.
Do the do the publishers come to you and say, "Hey, guess what? You get delayed billing," or do you go to them and say, "Hey, can I get this?"
Well, yeah, that's a very good question. First of all, you have to. I'm assuming you have a rep, a publisher's rep.
Yeah, supposedly they're out there. They just don't come my way.
You really have to, I've developed relationships with publisher reps, and basically anytime the publisher has an offer, they would shoot me an email and say, we have, I'll say to them, I have an order to place, do you have any specials coming up?
Okay.
So they'll say, what are we, June? We have a delayed billing offer coming July 3rd. I say, okay, I can wait. Or we have a plus 3% discount coming up at the end of the month. So yes, you can definitely ask your reps.
Okay. I know it can be hard to get on publishers' radar, especially as a new store, but just nudging your rep is your potential advocate with the publisher and your source of information about what they can offer you, for sure.
Word, thank you. Sorry, I had one more.
Yeah.
Also in the beginning, you talked about the London Book Fair and
Correct.
the remainder warehouses.
Correct.
Where do you find these?
Okay, so the remainder business used to be much bigger in the 80s and 90s than it is today. However, there are, I want to say, maybe about 7 or 8 remainder houses that are the best ones to visit, and most of them do go to the London Book Fair. If you want me to give you some names of remainder houses, I'd happily do that. For instance, the leaders in the US are Book Depot out of Toronto. They have a website, bookdepot.com. You can just go and visit it. There's American Book Company out of Nashville, Tennessee. There's also Great Jones Books out of Pennington, New Jersey. And then there's Powell's Books Wholesale out of Chicago. And of course, the ones that I buy from that go to the London Book Fair are Powell's Books and Texas Bookman out of Dallas, Texas. They usually, when they come back in March, it takes them about a few weeks to upload all the books that they bought from the British publishers onto their website. And you can see, like if you're buying classics like me, you can see the look of them because it really matters how they look. There's also a house called LBM out of Atlanta. And they basically import all the Wordsworth books from England. And these you can, they don't have US prices on them, so you can price them yourself. These are the top 5, I think, or top 6 remainder houses.
Thanks for that. Yeah, step right up.
Quick question with regard to returning books versus discounting and clearancing. Any thoughts to share?
We run into that quite often. We're very aggressive with our returns. It's because I just love to purge things. But if it's like a cookbook or a really heavy, coffee table book, we try to clearance those because it's so much more expensive to send those books back. So it just depends. If it's super heavy, try to clearance them. Picture books, we do the same thing, try to clearance those. But most of the other paperbacks for sure, we return, and then we'll return the hardcovers when the paper versions come out.
Yeah, and we include the freight of returns as one of our forecasted costs.
Yes.
We just, because we're anticipating we can return books for full credit, so we're getting the full, what we paid, our cost of goods, we're getting that back again, but the cost to us is the cost of the freight. So that's just something we build in rent, that we just anticipate that's going to be part of our costs, but that doesn't work for everyone. Some stores would prefer to mark them down, to make it depends how much you want to mark them down. It depends how much you want to pay for freight. It could come out of the wash, out in the wash. If you can mark it down just enough that it would be that you're getting a better deal than you would get mailing them back, then that might make more sense for you. For us, it's we don't have the space. We don't have a lot of display space for discounted books.
Yeah, we don't
so we focus on return. So I think it's a store by store decision, but you want to be sort of doing the math on what's going to make the most sense for you.
And it may also be affected by your cash flow. So if we have Tina's example of I'm paying $1,000 this month, but I owe $12,000, if you know you can do $3,000 worth of returns to that publisher that you owe $12,000 to, you've now just done future you one of the best favors you can. So you might change your direction depending on what you can foresee is going to be on the horizon.
That's absolutely true.
Such
It's
a good
returning these PRH books is going to allow me to pay for these PRH books.
Yes.
That's a huge factor.
Also, it's really important to keep your eyes open on when these books, these days publishers are remaindering books much quicker than they used to. They used to wait a year sometimes. Now I'm amazed. I find books being remaindered 6 months after they're being published. So, and I find them on websites as remainders while I have them still at full price. So it's really important that you browse these websites on a regular basis, or your staff browse them. Because you don't want other bookstores to have them at $9.98 when you're still selling them at $28.
I think back here you had a question. You have the mic? Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just going to be very vulnerable. The thought of doing all returns makes me want to crawl into a hole and die.
Oh, no. It is.
So I literally have just avoided it. I've been open almost 2 years, so 2 years in September, and I feel like my backstock is getting to be very overwhelming, and I don't even know where to start. I don't know if there's rules about how long I can have a book or all of the things. So if anybody's really awesome at this, if you could connect with me and make me feel way less overwhelmed. I am a one-person shop, so I can't make my staff do this.
I'll talk to you.
I don't have staff.
I'm a very small shop too, so we'll connect.
She's gonna.
Oh, I hate return. Okay, well, I'm in Lincoln, Nebraska, so if anybody wants to come do this for me, that'd be great.
Okay, you could have a returns party, everybody.
Yes.
Books.
Oh, regional sessions of
Party.
That would actually be fun. But Tina's very happy to talk to you afterwards if you want to make time.
You're welcome.
Cool.
In regards to the returns and the whole like budgeting, well, I'll send this back. Like, what is the average estimate for how long it takes for publishers to process your returns? Because like, if you're trying to budget that, like, or can you tell the publisher, hey, I'm not going to pay this whole bill until you process those things I returned. Like, how's that work?
Yeah, right. It depends.
It depends on the publisher. So I will say we're talking about having relationships with your reps if you have one, whether in-house or phone rep. Another person to have a really good relationship with is your credit rep.
Absolutely.
So the person who literally knows your billing and your statements is different from your publisher rep. And so if you have a relationship with that person and you can say, can I pay half of this bill and then whatever remains once my returns get processed? Like they know what's going on, and being really frank and honest and saying, because the worst thing, it's kind of like the IRS, the worst thing you can do is go silent, right? Just being in touch, being in relationship with them, knowing their name, anything like that will be helpful because it does vary. Like sometimes credits are quite quick and other times it's months. I know what my back room looks like. I can't even imagine what some big publisher warehouse looks like to process all of those returns in a timely manner. So yeah, the more you're open, the more you'll know how long that lead time is, and then you can calculate that into your flow.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
One thing I'd like to add to that is what I do is when I return books, say at the end of the month, I always take advantage of that return when I'm paying the bill. However, I do it ethically because when I pay the bill, I always put the POD number, the proof of delivery, of what I sent together with my check and a copy of that return if I'm taking advantage of that return. If I'm deducting these dollars from what I'm paying, I enclose a copy to the credit rep and I say POD, which is proof of delivery. I put the number down. This way they know that the return is in-house. They have the return. And if they have the return, I take the deduction. Now, some warehouses are very busy and it takes them months sometimes to process your return. I'm not going to wait months to get my credit. Let it be a chargeback on my statement, but have a good relationship with your credit rep and let them know that you did send that return. There's proof of delivery, so when the credit is processed, it will cancel out the chargeback.
I mean, publishers would probably prefer that you wait until the credit shows up on your account, but
True.
you can use those other options. Was there someone else with a question? Did you get the mic to them?
Yeah, I had a question.
Great.
So I've been open 3 years, and I feel like I've been finally kind of figuring out the invoicing and how everything is different for each publisher and trying to keep it all organized. Batch for books has been amazing, but just for 3 publishers.
Right.
And I'm afraid to open more publisher accounts because it's so much. To me, it's so much easier to buy sidelines and pay all those other bills, but the invoices are really hard. And I mean, maybe ABACUS could help, but I just feel like, is there a resource out there that could?
So the recommendation I've gotten recently from PK that we've just recently instituted, because yes, you're absolutely right. Like if you have accounts with all of the major publishers and some indie presses, you're gonna have a stack of invoices that's like this big every month, and that's insane. Like that's so much time that you can't spend selling books. So what we recently did is set up an account with Bill.com, which it's basically like AI. Like you every email that comes in with an invoice attached to it goes into Bill.com and it gets entered. And you have to do a little bit of double checking, but are you writing it down? Yes, write it down, Bill.com. It's sort of like a slightly dummy version of Batch. It's not specific to publishers. It doesn't we're still figuring out how it handles credits because we're really very new to using it, but it's saving us a ton of that busy work time that you could spend entering all of your publisher invoices. So thank you, PK, once again for another great recommendation. And it won't be for everyone, but it's working for us. So that's one idea.
There are, correct me if I'm wrong, There are not a lot of publishers that have like online paying. Is this correct? Like a system that you can pay online. What in the actual, like the fact that I have to write checks and send with invoice, with all of the publishers that you have, like they're like the rage that I have inside of me that I'm sending actual checks.
Oh yeah.
Like, and some of the smaller publishers that I work with, they have an online paying system. I'm like, okay, come on, PHR. Like, what is happening? Why? Right? I'm not like wrong in saying
You're
that.
not crazy.
Okay. I just want to make sure. I was on batch at one time, and it confused the hell out of me.
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
I need to try again.
It's worthwhile, getting yourself, investing the time to get your head wrapped around batch, because then you don't have to wrap your head around Penguin Random House, Macmillan, and HarperCollins and all of their invoicing.
Right.
And we really hope, if there are any publishers in the room, we want more publishers to get onto batch, because then you just have one platform to deal with and not all these other ones. But yeah, I mean, does anyone want to talk about the weirdness of publisher payments?
Sure. I do think part of it is the credit card fees. So one of the things that we're seeing is credit card surcharges, particularly on our gift items that we're buying. So when we're thinking about those variable costs and hidden costs and unexpected costs, we're trying to calculate the pricing of our goods to not just accommodate freight, but to also accommodate these surcharges that are coming along. And I think that's part of why some of the bigger publishers are not taking that sort of online or credit card approach on a regular basis, because it can be 1.5% to 3% that just is going to eat at their bottom line. So there is no elegant solution, and you're 100% right to be frustrated. My bookkeeping department is the same as you, what the, right? So you're not alone in that.
Yeah. I have a question. Hi. My name is Pranu Kumar. I own Rohi's Readery. It's a social justice-driven children's bookstore and learning center in West Palm Beach, Florida. And my question is, I've been open now for almost 3 years. As of next week. Yeah.
Awesome. Congrats. Anniversary.
And I've been hearing a lot about sideline items. And when I first opened, I was going on Fair. I was doing all these things, trying to order as many things that were all around our mission around historically marginalized communities. And what I found was that I still had these items for a very long period of time. But I had a lot of personalized items that were getting bought more frequently, like readery stickers, shirts, things like that. I guess my question is, well, two things. Sorry, I'm processing. It takes me a little longer. With items, I've been hearing have toys, have things around children, but I've actually had customers coming in saying I'm so glad you don't have toys in here because I want my kids to be with the books. So I'm just trying to any advice on what sideline items?
What's the mix? What does the mix look like?
What does the mix look like?
Yeah, no, I'm.
Okay.
It sounds like that's the question. I'm trying to.
And I think it varies on where your store is located.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
For instance, you might have my store. I don't have any other really retail around, so we carry a little bit of everything. We carry socks, we carry bookmarks, we carry jewelry. Because there's no other place to buy gifts. Okay. But if you're in a different location, you might not want to compete with that store next door. Right. So it's very, very variable, I guess, depending on who you are, where you are.
Okay. Thank you.
It might also be seasonal too. Yeah. So, if you focus on, winter and summer and, summer reading and really leaning into that, but then come holiday season when people are looking for more inspiration, you expand your offerings.
Yeah.
That might, kind of give you the best of both worlds.
No, thank you. That was already, I'm going to write it down. And then one other question is, the one thing I do love, and we support our youth entrepreneurs. So we have a section where it's kids from ages 8 to 12, 13 that are selling their items. And it's so hard. I don't take any percentage of that. I don't want to, but I don't know what. But I also don't know, like, am I doing right by my entrepreneur, like them as entrepreneurs?
Right, we've
So-
done that before with like a community like oral history magazine that we sold in our store, and we didn't take any profit from it because it felt like purely like this is part of our community service. This is part of serving our community. But I mean but you have to justify the space that takes up. And then it's like maybe you want your entrepreneurs to know, like, here's like, what it's like when you take your goods to a retail establishment.
Yes.
I see both sides.
Yes. All right.
Did you want to speak to that question? Yeah.
So that is super resonant to me. What we do in that case is twice a year we have a kids makers mart, and throughout the year we do not sell any handmade kid stuff because, again, you don't want to take money from children, and also you want to give them a platform to feel, amazing about being a maker. So we schedule 2 right before the holidays and right as school is ending. So we just had our second one. And it's amazing because we'll pay for the space. It's not at our store. Sometimes it's been at our store. It's now so big that we moved off site. And it's a thing that we do for the community. People look forward to it. And then they come in throughout the year and ask, like, so when's Kids Maker Mart? When is our... And it's been really fun because the kiddos who show up to that are our readers, and they are the families who we engage with throughout the year, and they have these specific times of year that they get to look forward to. So we try to, like, give them a little space, and then also we see them regularly. And it's hard.
That's such a good idea. We have time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions. Anybody? Actually, writing that down.
Hey everybody, less of a question, but just circling back over to how to pay all these publishers and dealing with all sorts, and hopefully more people will go on to batch and whatnot. But what we've done in the meantime is we use a resource called Melio, and that allows us to do ACH payments. And so almost all of our publishers are like, yes, you can go ahead and pay us electronically. So we haven't written a check in about a year. So, Melio, M-E-L-I-O. And so again, all you have to do is request from the publisher their ACH information, and every single one of them that we've reached out to has given us that information.
And sometimes you can do those ACH payments directly through your bank, depending on what bank it is. But Melio is a great resource as well.
Yeah, we do the same.
How do you all handle damages?
You want to talk about that?
I can take
Go for it. Yeah.
Basically, whether it's a publisher or it's a distributor, you have to either email them or call it in, I want to say right away, within a day or 2. And most publishers would just send you a replacement copy, free of charge. Some distributors may ask for pictures of the damages, if there's a lot of them. If it's maybe 1 damage per shipment, they will probably give you credit. But the key here is to report them right away.
Yes.
And you can't wait, like when the invoice is due, to report them a month down the line.
And often you'll have a choice between either getting a replacement copy or getting credit if you donate or destroy that damaged item.
Correct.
So again, it depends on the publisher. A lot of this is about building those relationships with publishers, with your credit rep, with your sales rep, with the folks who can sort of answer the questions about how that particular publisher works.
Right.
And if you have floor damaged items, I don't know that there's an elegant solution. Everyone treats those a little bit differently, but they just fundamentally go to your cost of goods because you bought it, but you can't sell it.
Yeah.
Or you have to sell it at a greatly reduced rate.
All right, I think we're at time. Okay. Right. Very good point. Wait, can you say it into the mic? Thank you.
I was just a comment that batch, you can process claims on batch. And you only get credit, you can't I don't think opt for placement, or at least maybe I just don't. But that's another good thing for batch, other than Penguin, which is electronic. But I found that most of the publishers you can do electronic now, unless they're smaller. It's like so much easier than it used to be. I just go on their website and process it, and
Awesome.
that's been really good. So.
Thank you so
thank
much.
You for
Thanks,
mentioning that.
everyone.
Thanks everyone for being here.
Thank you for listening to Booked, the Bookstore Education Podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app. Additional educational resources can always be found on the ABA website at www.bookweb.org. Happy reading!